This is part 3 of my $45,000 grandma story. And if you're new here and you're like, what do you mean $45,000 grandma story? The alternative name for this story was the time my grandma was to see you next Tuesday. And I pledged that if we reach $45,000 in my family and goal, that I would tell this story about the time that my grandma was a flying monkey and told my estranged mom everything that I told her. But before I go any further, this is a reminder that I'm raising money for 2 families in... The first is Rhonda, who has several family members that are in need of urgent medical care, including her father, who's in dire need of heart surgery, and they have been stuck at this place in their goal for a long time. The second is Rabah, who we were able to get to their initial goal of $45,000, so they will be able to escape into Egypt after the border opens. However, that's not enough money for them to be able to survive, get food, find shelter, all of that stuff, so that's why the goal has been increased to $70,000. So I'm asking that for payment for this story, I'm asking that you give $5 to either this or this if you have over $1,000 in your bank account. And if you have under $1,000, you give $1 to $2 here. I post receipts every day of me giving that away. And if you can't do that, I understand. Engage over here. Make a comment that is 9 words or more that's relevant to this specific video. No heart chains, no additional emojis. That cues off the Al Gore. Or you can purchase this shirt from the TikTok shop link. All commissions go to Rhonda or Rabah's family, as well as all profits go to Doctors Without Borders located here. And even if you don't want to purchase it, that's okay. Just click on the link, add it to your cart. That will help this video get seen. Thank you so much. All right, so where we left off was I was talking about my mom being the black sheep for being adopted. So I actually talked about this with my grandma while I was there. We talked about how there used to be this belief that if you adopted somebody while they were still an infant, it wouldn't cause any trauma, and how now research shows that that's not true. That there's inherently biological trauma that happens when you separate a baby from their birth mother. That's part of why skin-to-skin contact in hospitals is so important. And so as we were talking about this, what's so confusing is, looking back on this, it's hard for me to tell, even though this was only a couple weeks ago, if this is an accurate memory or, I'm looking at it still through some rose-colored glasses. But my grandma apologized when I was telling her about stuff that happened in my childhood with my mom, because she was but because she's part of me, I made her that way, partially. And I was like, this is confusing because you're taking accountability. So that made me feel, again, like I was safe. And then we were talking about that birth trauma, and where it's confusing is that she would say those apologies, but then she'd also be like, I don't know how your mom ended up this way. I don't know why she feels this way. So it was accountability to me, but not actually accountability to my mom, which should have been a red flag. Because then I'm basically explaining to her why it is that my mom feels this way and why she felt unsupported by her mom. And my grandma was just kind of listening and not really acknowledging what I'm saying, but she also wasn't dismissing it or being directly invalidating. So I was like, okay, maybe she's listening to me, Also, to add, when we were talking about the alcoholism, my grandma brought up asked me if I thought that they should do an intervention, and I was like, ooh, that's a big conversation. I tried to talk to her about all the things that can happen when you have an intervention, and basically it was you really need to bring somebody in from the outside, because people who have substance abuse issues often lash out very intensely at people when there's an intervention, especially if it was my grandparents, because I think my mom still really believes that they're fooled, and to have that wall shattered, that fourth wall shattered, that's oh no, actually we've known the whole time that you're an alcoholic. I'd be scared to be in that room. I would be very scared to be in that room. I don't think that my mom would harm my grandparents, because again, she cares so much about their opinion of her and appearances with them, whereas with me she doesn't care because she thinks she can control me. But I still was I would avidly warn against it. And so we ended up deciding okay, that's not something that they're gonna do right now, and basically just don't let her continue to let her drive you places. If she comes there and she's inebriated, try to keep the visit as short as possible, do things to help protect yourself. But no, it's probably not wise for you to confront this with her. Also, because she'll hit rock bottom, and she may go off the deep end, and you may have to deal with that. There's this very real reality of when you call a loved one out for their substance abuse issues, you feel a level of responsibility, even though it's not your fault or your responsibility. It's their life choices, their responsibility to hold. You always have it in the back of your mind, if I call this out, will they go drive somewhere inebriated and hit somebody and unalive them? Those are the things that go on in the back of your mind. It's not this just simple, easy decision. It's very heavy cost risk and risk. Oh my God, what's the word? My brain is fried. It's like risk cost pro analysis. You know what I'm trying to say. So then we're still talking about my mom in childhood, and my grandma goes on to tell me about how there were issues in her childhood of my mom physically assaulting my aunt. And that one time it happened, she remembered. And so she told me, she sat my mom down and was like, if you ever lay a hand on your siblings, I don't know, something bad's gonna happen. She didn't really say what she said after that. But that like she told her she couldn't do that, and if she had a problem to come to her, and that she would like, you know, deal with it as she saw fit. And not to like defend my mother, because obviously like physical violence is not okay, and my mother is the worst. If you have not heard any of my stories about her, I have a whole playlist on it called Abuse Recovery, okay? Which this is also going to be a part of. But that's all that to say, like, I can also understand if you're the scapegoated child, you know, if you go to your parent and you tell them that like the golden child, which is what my aunt was, is doing something to them, they're going to ignore it. They're going to just tell you you're overreacting. You know, they're going to gaslight you. And so to an extent, like, it's understandable for my mom as a child to feel like she had to be judge, jury, executioner to my aunt, because she probably wasn't being listened to by my grandma. Anyways, so I guess later on in life, my aunt told my grandma that this was happening frequently. Like, it didn't just happen that one time, but that after that first time, she was terrified to tell my grandma, because my mom told her that if she did, she would unalive her. And while like this insight was nice to get, again, it should have been a red flag that my grandma was like dumping all my mom's tea and doing everything she could to make my mom look like she was just this villain that came out of nowhere, not a creation of my grandparents' actions. And you know, they are silent generation, so they very much had like authoritarian parenting styles. It was very much like, you do this because I say you do this, not we're gonna tell you why, we're gonna gentle parent you. Like, that wasn't a thing back then. And so even just with that, like, that's a level of trauma that every child had that had parents like that. At this point, I keep telling her and explaining to her, like, hey, this is really difficult for me to tell you. A lot of people who are in my situation, if they have a family member that they go to and they tell them this, that family member often goes back to the other family member and picks their side. And I just want to make sure I'm as clear as possible that, like, I don't want you to pick sides. I don't want you to do that. I understand that this is a difficult position to be in, you know, because like it's your child and your grandchild. You have to love both of us. Sorry. Ooh, this is bringing all the feelings. And like, I don't want you to end your relationship with my mom because of this. I just don't want to have any involvement with her whatsoever. Meaning, like, I would love to continue to have this relationship with you. I would love to see you, but like, you have to keep this separate, because that's my biggest fear, is that you won't, that you'll tell her. And my grandma in the moment decided to tell me, to reassure me again, that not only would she not tell them, but if she was forced to pick sides, that she would pick mine, and that she's confident that everyone in the family would do the same, because my mom had done so much to burn bridges with other family members, and that my uncle apparently doesn't even talk to her, and my grandma doesn't know why. And I'm like, that's really not necessary. Like, you really don't. I don't want you to overpromise, because I'm going to be so disappointed if this turns out to not be true. Foreshadowing. And she's like, no, I really mean this. Like, we will always pick our grandchildren first. And she said to me, this is so crazy, guys. She said to me, you were the child, your mom was the adult in all of this. Yes, you're an adult now, but you weren't an adult then. She should have known better. Okay, I need to take a little break. I need to go cry for a little bit, but like and comment for part 4.